So prior to that time, a lot of things we used to go by hearsay and by observations around. I mean, that's how the science has always developed through centuries. I mean, through several thousand years, human beings look around themselves, and whatever out of curiosity they can do and find, they accept that as knowledge, as a part of the knowledge. And a lot of traditional knowledge, in a sense, has evolved in that particular sense, that by random experiments and by chance, people have figured out that some of the plant extracts, some of the metals and all have been useful as against particular diseases and that kind of things. But last 100 years, the focus definitely changed towards understanding diseases. And those of you who are interested in drug discovery, modern drug discovery, I would recommend this review to read. It's about 20 years old, but nonetheless, very well written review by Drews. And essentially, it says that how today modern science has actually driven drug discovery by a combination of multiple disciplines like chemistry, biology, medicine, and so on and so forth. And what happens is that all it began essentially from Paul Ehrlich's ideas that there are receptors in the body for a variety of different things. And if these receptors, we actually evolve some either inhibitors or activators of these receptors, then many of the physiological conditions in the body can actually be explained by this. And therefore, Paul Ehrlich hypothesized in 1870s that different chemoreceptors on different organisms and different tissues could be exploited for therapies. So this was essentially Ehrlich's hypothesis then for finding out selectively in inhibiting enzymes and receptors and so on and so forth. In the initial years of drug research, it was principally driven by chemistry. But increasingly in the modern times, it has been driven even by clinicians and pharmacologists. But now what you see the emergence of even genomics and all these kind of areas in the modern drug discovery. So it's a fairly complex amalgam of variety of different disciplines which contribute to modern drug discovery. And the efforts in CSIR are no different. Let us very briefly look at how many drugs have been approved. For example, in US FDA, in the last few years, I mean, if we start our bar from 1993 onwards, we see that, I mean, this year, about 53 new drugs have been approved by US FDA. And what you see here in the bar are the yellow bars, which are the novel entities, and the blue bar are the essentially biological entities. So novel compounds, NCEs, they're in 40. So they basically have the new compounds and whatever. And in the blue bars are the biologicals like antibodies or therapeutic proteins and so on and so forth. And clearly you see the shift that is happening in the last 30 years is going from the biologics, which were actually very few in 93, 94, 95 time, all of a sudden have started becoming more and more important. And that is also being driven primarily by many of the monoclonal antibodies and all, which are actually getting approval in the field for a period of time. And this is very actually interesting to see this particular shift that people are actually moving from chemical entities towards biologics, although the shift is visible, but not that prominent yet. And that actually gives some sort of a feeling that in the coming years, the biologics also are going to play a very major important role in tackling with diseases and so on and so forth. In terms of Indian industry, if you look at in this particular perspective, what has been India's role in the pharmaceutical sector, what we find is that India's market turnover is roughly about $18 billion. And Indian industry's contribution is largest in the generic segment, right? I mean, either the over-the-table counters or some of the ones actually contribute to some extent, but generics actually is the largest pharmaceutical produce of India. And that's primarily because of the low cost of production that actually happens in India. And therefore, India is a major exporters of bulk drugs, intermediates, and so on and so forth. And many of these actually are anti-infectives, they're cardiac, they're gastrointestinal tract, and so on and so forth are actually in this. However, there is a vision that has been prepared, which should say that India should become a global leader in end-to-end drug manufacturing. which means it should start from early drug discovery phase and all the way go into drug manufacturing, and in between cover entire area, including clinical trials, including manufacturing of APIs, and so on and so forth. So for that, we actually need to look at Indian pharma's general foothold, how it is actually. And if we look at actually a complete spectrum, start from the left-hand side where I've written basic research 2 to 3 years and go all the way to number 7, generic version. What we see is that in the early phase of discovery, right? I mean, when you are trying to evolve new chemical entities, you are filing INDs, you are doing preclinical trials, one is doing clinical trials. In all of these, as we go from left to right in this particular figure, the contribution from the Western world is much more significant on the left-hand bar of this particular figure. However, as we start going towards right and more right, what we see by the time we come to the generic version is the contribution of Indian pharma becomes more and more significant, which also means to say that Indian pharma probably is not putting in enough efforts into basic research or preclinical or early clinical work. Now, there are reasons for this. We can't just blame pharmaceuticals, the pharmaceutical industry for this, Indian academia also, and in general, the entire Indian ecosystem in pharmaceutical research actually needs to relook at this particular version. And if our vision or if our aspiration is going to be end-to-end drug research in the coming years, we must start from the leftmost bar of the graph, what is shown here as the basic research, and then gradually move towards the rightmost, that is the generic version. And we must cover all of this. Having said that, there are a lot of difficulties and challenges in the thing. Our regulatory processes are fairly complex. Our R&D in drug research is very minimal. Our interactions between academia and industry are also minimal. So all of this, if we combine together, we must actually have a good opportunity to correct this to get an end-to-end vision for Indian pharmaceutical. If you look at the total pharmaceutical value chain in the industry, it actually goes from drug discovery phase up to sales and marketing. And in between, you have drug development. That is, after the drug discovery is done, the formulations and clinical trials and so on and so forth. Manufacturing, which poses its own challenges in the GMP facility. And also fermentation and packaging of fermentation-derived products. That also is a challenge. And then, of course, sales and marketing, which actually is good. Now, if you look at interventions from CSIR, because I've been asked to focus essentially on CSIR, CSIR has strengths in certain early areas of drug discovery, for example, in genomics, in medicinal chemistry, and so on and so forth. CSIR has certain strengths in pharmacology, toxicology, and all. And CSIR also has strengths in certain manufacturing processes. You know, I mean, for example, we are very strong in genomics, and we are very strong in medicinal chemistry. And what actually now it calls for is integration of all of these so that India becomes now a major player in the early part of that. I think towards the left, what you see drug discovery and drug development, that part of the graph is actually what India becomes. And that is aspiration of CSIR, that in the coming years, we should become stronger and stronger in this early part, drug discovery and drug development, and then hand out pharmaceutical industry so that the industry becomes stronger in the later part, like manufacturing and sales and marketing and so on and so forth. Just to give you a flavor, the variety of different things that happen in CSIR, for example, pharmaceutical chemistry, there are multiple labs which are involved in this. For example, Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, Hyderabad, the Central Drug Research Institute, Lucknow, the Institute of Microbial Technology, Chandigarh, the National Chemical Laboratory, Pune, Indian Institute of Chemical Biology in Calcutta, and so on and so forth. And similarly, we have some strengths in drug delivery, pharmacogenomics, and so on and so forth. We also have expertise in environmental impact analysis, and few of our labs also participate in that particular respect. So what we had done a few years ago in CSIR, the entire science and technology spectrum that CSIR handles, we had defined that into 8 different verticals. And there are 2 verticals which are essentially related to this particular area that what we are talking just now. One of them is the healthcare, what we call it the healthcare theme, and the other one is chemicals, including leather. But let us talk a little bit about the healthcare. In the healthcare, we have been very strong in the genomic route to preventive healthcare. In fact, we are quite strong in the genome sequences and all. And as all of you would have seen, in the COVID-19 period, bulk of the country's sequencing, actually that burden, we have taken up upon ourselves. On today's date, in the international databases, about 35,000 odd genome sequences from India have been deposited, and more than half of these have come from CSIR labs. But we also have strong programs for medicines of tomorrow, for infectious diseases, phytopharmaceuticals and nutrition. And I will actually spend a little bit about time and phytopharmaceuticals little later, but also devices and basic biology. Just like the healthcare theme, we have another theme. As I said, we have 8 principal themes that we work on in CSIR. Another theme is that a chemical theme. And in chemicals, we work on variety of different things like catalysts. We add value to multiple variety of different chemicals. We work on bulk chemicals and also APIs. APIs is turning out to be one of the major concerns in the recent years, the active pharmaceutical ingredients. And what we would like to do is that our dependence on other countries on APIs should reduce as much as possible, but also fermentation products and so on and so forth. So these are the 2 principal themes of CSIR. They work on the drug discovery process in general. And combining these 2 themes is what we have are some of our drug discovery programs. And with this, we had launched several missions in the last 2 years. One of the missions is, for example, API mission. And the API mission was essentially launched during the COVID-19 period, because we realized that many of the active pharmaceutical ingredients are really imported. That means what Indian industry has been doing in the last few years, increasingly, Indian industry imports active pharmaceutical ingredients, makes a formulation of it, packages into a tablet, and then sells it all over the world as generic medicine. What we are concerned about is that this import part of the APIs, and we believe, chemistry being a very strong point of India, we have an opportunity to reduce those imports there. We also have a mission in CSIR on INDs, the investigational new drugs, and we have a number of INDs that we are actually planning to file or already filed. We have a mission going on antivirals, and we have actually taken up a very challenging program, a very exciting program on breast and gynecological cancers of Indian relevance. And this program is about to start, in which we'll be sequencing a large number of breast and gynecological cancers across India, and try to find out whether are there mutations or chromosomal disorders in India that what we find unusual from that of the Western countries. As far as the IND mission is concerned, as I said, the number of INDs have already been filed. As you see on the top, some of the INDs that have already been filed, and they relate to things like anti-malarials, fracture healing, hyperlipidemia, and so on and so forth. We have even filed an IND for one of the first anti-pancreatic cancer drugs recently. And in fact, this particular drug has now entered clinical trial in collaboration with Tata Memorial Hospital in Mumbai. There are 2 other second category molecules which are there. We are pushing very through, and we are hoping that in the next 24 months or so, we will be able to file INDs on these particular molecules. And they once again span a large spectrum. Like one is anti-triple negative cancer, breast cancer. One is neuropathic pain, sepsis, and so on and so forth. So this is the IND portfolio of CSIR, and this actually is the first baby step towards taking these molecules into clinical trials. As all of you know, that these molecules actually have evolved in our labs through years of research in medicinal chemistry and the lab research. We have come up with certain new chemical entities, and eventually, after doing preclinical trials and all, we have been able to file INDs on all of this. And therefore, these are ready now for entering the clinical trials. Some of the recent ones that have been filed are 2 examples I've shown here. One is an antithrombotic agent, S0071867, and it essentially acts as an inhibitor of collagen-induced platelet aggregation. And we have already licensed it to a company, and the phase 1 clinical trials are now being initiated in collaboration with King Edward Memorial College in Mumbai. Similarly, there is another molecule which is fracture healing. is a novel orally active fracture healing molecule, first in its class. And the phase 1 clinical trials are now being initiated with King George Medical University in Lucknow. There are many other molecules which are in preclinical developments, especially those against malaria, leishmaniasis, and sepsis. And we are hoping that if the preclinical developments are successful, we will be able to file INDs for these also. Similarly, we have some leads on new chemical entities, on novel chemical entities, and we have already been able to file INDs on all of these with the regulator. Now, some of these are actually plant derived. And this is where actually I wanted to say a little bit about the phytopharmaceutical, or maybe I will reserve my comments for a little later. But a very exciting route to discovering new drugs in recent times has been the route what we call as phytopharmaceuticals. And I'll come to that a little later. The phytopharmaceutical drug essentially is defined as a purified and standard fraction or an extract from a plant which has minimum 4 bioactive compounds. If one does a profile of this particular extract from medicinal plant, should have at least 4 bioactive compounds, is what now would be described as a phytopharmaceutical. The US FDA calls this as botanicals, and till date, US FDA has given approval to 2 botanicals. One is called catechins, and other is called Furyzac. Now, both of these have been discovered in China, and Indian researchers have not yet approached anyone to find out new phytopharmaceuticals and approach regulators if these are found to be effective against certain disorders. What I want to tell this audience today is that phytopharmaceuticals presents as a huge opportunity for us in India. And that's because we have a very rich traditional knowledge in which traditionally we know many plants have certain desirable activities against certain diseases, either preventive or curative. And these plant extracts, therefore, we can actually try to look for with 4 signature compounds. If we are able to actually prove that from the modern science perspective, in that case, we have a gold mine lying ahead of us. To young researchers who are here, I would like to tell them that the way modern drug discovery actually evolved in the last 125 years was, if there was a disease, let us say any particular disease, if you want to combat the disease, or if you want to find a cure for the disease, one assumes that for that particular disease, there's one single cause, either a mutation in the gene or an external agent such as a bacteria or a virus that is responsible for the disease. So for one disease, there is one single cause. And if you have to have a cure for the disease, you have to define one single molecule which will cure that, which will attack this particular cause, either the defective gene or an external agent like a virus or a bacterium, and attack that and have that compound which will inhibit the activity of these. So this is a paradigm that has been evolved over 100 years. But last about 10-15 years, increasingly, people over around the world, they realized that traditionally, 100 years ago, till 100 years ago, over centuries, we have always used extracts from plants and all to cure diseases. And there must be something in that. And therefore, if we can actually use these extracts, and then US FDA defined that should have 4 signature molecules, and eventually US FDA gave an approval to this category called botanicals in the year 2005. So US FDA gave approval to this category called botanicals as defined here in 2005. Indian regulator gave approval to phytopharmaceutical, essentially identical to this botanical what we are talking about, in the year 2015 or 2016, something like that. In 2015. What it means is that for the last 5 or 6 years, we have a category of compounds or the drugs available, potential drugs available called phytopharmaceuticals, and that presents a huge opportunity for Indian researchers to go after this. And CSIR, DBT, ICMR, and all the agencies have actually taken very firm steps in this direction, that we want to exploit our traditional knowledge and come up with phytopharmaceuticals against many diseases. And CSIR has actually taken a very nice route. For example, our institute in Jammu, Indian Institute of Integrative Medicine, has been trying extracts from several plants and trying them for multiple diseases like ulcer, rheumatoid arthritis, Alzheimer's disease, and so on and so forth. And some of them we have filed IND already with DCGI, and some of them we are going to file IND in the coming time. And I would like to once again emphasize is that this is a great area of opportunity for Indian researchers in the coming time. And CSIR has taken very definitive step, but others also are welcome to join these particular efforts and try to see whether we can actually exploit this particular category. And then in the world of medicine, all over the world, we have an opportunity to make a mark that these drugs have arrived from India. We also have been doing the other route, that is a single chemical route, as I said, that what has been there till 2005, that one disease, one cause, and one chemical to inhibit that cause. And towards that, many of our labs have been actually synthesizing large number of compounds, and these large number of compounds typically are then stored in what we call as the National Mall Bank that we have created in the Indian Institute of Chemical Technology in Hyderabad. And IICT Hyderabad has now a complete pipeline for preparation of these samples, for screening them against targets, either cell-based or target-based screening, and so on and so forth. And they have been able to actually identify a number of compounds in this, and they are going ahead for filing INDs against this particular compound. And realizing the potential of the great depth that what we have in terms of chemistry and all in CSIR, some of the major pharmaceutical industries have signed agreement with CSIR. For example, you would have seen this particular agreement 2 years ago. The Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, Hyderabad, and Sun Pharma signed an agreement for roughly about 240 crore rupees, which is a phase-wise manner, for development, regulatory, and sales milestones of new compounds that what we develop. And as I said, these have been based on the research that we do in our labs, primarily in the chemical domain. So Sun Pharma has entered into a global licensing agreement with our institute, and for patents related to certain compounds and so on and so forth. So we work actually as CSIR, we always work very closely with the industry, not only in the pharmaceutical sector, but many other sectors. But pharmaceutical sector especially has been very close to our heart traditionally. And many of you know that when HIV drugs were extraordinarily costly, they were prohibitively expensive. In that period, our labs came forward, principally NCL and IICT Hyderabad, and both these labs together made the processes of HIV drug synthesis very affordable. And at that time, WHO, the World Health Organization, allowed India to start exporting these HIV drugs to sub-Saharan African countries. And that was a huge contribution that India made to the world of medicine, especially for those people who are from very poor countries and who would have otherwise found these drugs to be extremely unaffordable. And this journey has continued, but now we have expanded also in the new drug discovery modules and so on and so forth. And we are very closely working, as shown in this slide, with industry in this particular one. And one of the successful examples, recent examples of this, is this particular repurposed drugs, which is called as favipiravir. This drug actually is repurposed because it has been used as an anti-influenza molecule in countries like Japan and Russia and China. And we thought that it could also have anti-COVID-19 properties. We very quickly undertook clinical trials of this. And then when it was found that clinical trials were actually showing very promising results, we approached the DCGI for emergency approval. And DCGI was very gracious to give emergency approval to this. And today this is marketed by Cipla under the trade name as Ciplenza. But a large number of other trials also we have undertaken. For example, a drug called Arbidol or Umifenovir, that trials are almost over. The results appear to be exciting, and we will be actually approaching DCGI very soon for approval. A formulation called Sepsivac is a hit-killed Mycobacterium W. We have undertaken clinical trials till Cadila. Once again, phase 3 trials are now over, and we will be approaching DCGI very soon for this thing. Other repurposed drugs that we are trying out are colchicine, chlorpromazine, niclosamide, and so on and so forth. The phytopharmaceutical that we are trying against COVID-19 is something called AQCH, and we are trying clinical trials of this in collaboration with Sun Pharma and so on and so forth. We have also taken the traditional medicine route, what is called as the Ayush route in India, and we have initiated 5 clinical trials with Ayush from the modern perspectives, and we are trying to see whether some of the formulation described in Ayurveda can also act as good immune boosters or good antivirals against COVID-19. Now, this is about what we have done till now. You know, I mean, this is over the years what CSIR has done, starting from traditional drug discovery, initiating phytopharmaceutical missions, INDs, APIs, working closely with industry, and so on and so forth. When the COVID-19 came up upon us, that also presented us a new opportunity, very unique opportunity, that there are a large number of talented young people out there in India. People who are fresh from colleges, people who are fresh from universities, and they would actually like to try their hands in drug discovery. So drug discovery is a very long, lengthy process. It involves variety of different aspects. So if you are able to actually employ this manpower or challenge these younger people in small area of the entire drug discovery pipeline, let us say, if we actually challenge them to find out computational docking and ask them that come up with the best candidates for COVID-19 by simply doing computational analysis. In that case, the most exciting candidates CSIR can also undertake for chemical synthesis and screening later. And under this, what we did, this idea was proposed to us by the principal scientific advisor to Government of India. And he suggested to us that we should initiate what is called as a drug discovery hackathon. Right? I mean, all of you are aware of Smart India hackathon that goes on every year. But in the pharmaceutical sector, we undertook a drug discovery hackathon. A large number of students across the country participated in this particular hackathon. A number of problems were posed to them, and they actually learned how to do docking, how to do scoring, how to do structure activity relationships, and they came up with very promising scaffolds which now can be tested for in vitro and in vivo for anti-COVID-19 property. So this exercise just got over a few days ago, the first phase of drug discovery hackathon, and we are already working for the drug discovery hackathon in the second phase. And many of the young people who are out there would find it very interesting to participate in the drug discovery hackathon. And the duration of this is going to be between August 2021 and January 2022. The principal objective is to build capacity in computational drug discovery. The eligibility of students would be any graduate or postgraduate or with any background who have either completed or are pursuing the same are eligible to submit the interest. And a student should preferably have knowledge of coding or willing to learn the same. And what the drug discovery hackathon offers to you is that it will offer you online training program. It will offer you 6 months project work, and it will also give certain stipend for those who are successful in the early screening of these ones. We also have mentors which will drive this, and all of you can take a note of this. And it's a very exciting phase, what we believe in drug discovery in India as a country. You know, I mean, because some of these actually need to be promoted in the country, and for far too long, we haven't really focused too much on the early drug discovery phase, with the exception of very, very few academic labs. And one of the most distinguished academic labs in the country, which has focused attention on the early drug discovery, is that of Professor Tejpal Singh in AIIMS, New Delhi. But not many labs are like that, who have focused their attention on the early drug discovery phase. And we need to actually do that even with much more vigor in the coming time. So what we need to do in the coming time is essentially focus our emphasis on prevention than cures, that is of course vaccines. We also need to look at personalized or precision medicines. The exciting area that is coming up is the integration of artificial intelligence and data-driven technologies, and we should see how are we going to integrate in drug development. For just like what we had done for generics about 20-30 years ago, now there is a new opportunity to be in biologics. Around the world, new concepts are emerging in cell and gene therapies, in antimicrobial resistance, and so on and so forth. We also have opportunity in silico drug trials. Then number of orphan drugs that we can actually try out, and then artificial organs, implants, and prosthetics is another opportunity in this particular area, and 3D printed tablets and capsules. So in short, there is a huge opportunity which exists for younger people today. And I only wish before I hang up that I were 30 years younger. And this cannot be more than any exciting period that what we have had for pharmaceutical research in the country than what is there today. As I said, I only wish I were 30 years younger to be able to participate more actively in this particular program. Thank you all very much for your attention. And if there are any questions or something, I'll be very pleased to answer the questions. Thank you, Sonika, once again.
Most welcome. Actually, it is because of scientists like you over the past 3 days, and in the next 2 days, who, despite a very busy schedule, have very generously agreed to share their time with young researchers and with new researchers in the field, that we are able to hold this program and make it a success. So we should see. I should say that it was a very different kind of talk. We have only heard one or the other aspect of drug discovery till so far. You covered a large number of different areas. So it was very interesting.
Thank you, Sonika. Yeah. So somebody is asking that somebody is from botany background and has just joined for PhD and would be able to join phytopharmaceutical work like this. And that's a very interesting thing. What you should do actually, even within the department, that what you can do is that there would be professors, right? I mean, pharmacy professors or pharmacogenomics professors or whatever, and convince them that phytopharmaceuticals is a very interesting area that has emerged, and we should actually try them. The background that you will need for entering into this area, you will need to have good assay system, right? Whether the target-based assay system or cell-based assay system or whatever. And then you should also have a proper manufacturing thing behind you. That is, every time one takes a particular extract, that uniformity of that extract every time that you prepare has to be identical. You know, I mean, you cannot have extract prepared at one point of time which has certain signature, and 2 months from now, the same plant giving a different signature. That would not be acceptable to any regulator in future. So you will have to standardize this. This is a very painful process, but nonetheless, one can standardize this very well. Plants taken from a particular area, and every time they give the same signature of 4 molecules, one can do that. And then with the assay system that you have installed in the lab, one can try these extracts again that particular assay. And if you find good inhibition of that, let, for example, people say, right? I mean, we say that, let us say hypothetically, that tulsi is good, or we say that ginger extract is good, or we say haldi extract is good for a particular thing. Then if you have a good assay system for that, either a cell-based assay or whatever, then these extracts can be tried out. But the principle behind that, the extract has to be uniform every time you make that particular extract. So that can be, that has to be done. And then anyone can actually enter the phytopharmaceutical field in that particular sense. The second question that I see is somebody wants to apply for drug discovery hackathon. By all means, check with AICT and principal scientific advisor. Both of them are very deeply involved in this, and also CSIR. And just look for the web announcement of DDH, and anyone is welcome to participate in drug discovery hackathon. The online training module for drug design, these are indeed available as a part of the drug discovery hackathon. So those of you who are interested, online training would be provided in this. The students and faculty members, all of them are equally welcome in this particular respect. So it's not restricted only to students. Anyone is welcome to participate in the online training and the drug discovery hackathon. And alternate to animals, of course, is coming as a very, very strong concept that we actually are trying to look for first cell-based models. We are looking at 3D organoid models and organs on chips and so on and so forth. And they actually are extremely useful in drug discovery. And we have certain labs who are actually trying to generate these 3D organoids and all, especially our lab in Hyderabad, the CCMB, and also the lab in Delhi called IGIB. Both of them are trying to do that. The question that is asked is CSIR, does it provide fund for private organizations? Unfortunately not. CSIR essentially is an intramural funding agency. We also provide extramural support in limited extent to colleges and universities. Is there provision that one faculty can have training in CSIR lab, online or offline? Please join Drug Discovery Hackathon. This online training is a part of that, and you would be most welcome in that particular respect. Is it necessary to carry out clinical trial for herbal drug formation in India? Of course, yes. No drug would actually get a regulatory approval without an appropriate clinical trial. We get to hear a lot of hearsays when we say that my throat is paining and therefore mother gives me milk and haldi. Now this all of us know is a very effective system, and we all have used it since ages, this particular therapy at homes. But if you want to actually promote it as an acceptable therapy across the world, we will have to go through rigor of clinical trials. Clinical trials, if they prove it with appropriate controls, placebos and all, then we will be able to say that indeed, this it actually works, and clinical trials are essential aspect of that. What kind of plants extract should be selected for anti-cancer activity? I have no idea. But Sonika and all would have probably better idea than I have of what plants to actually use for anti-cancer. So that can. And Suresh Pal Verma has asked me whether a pharmaceutical profession can go to CSIR, collaboration with CSIR. By all means, contact our labs, IICT Hyderabad, CDRI Lucknow, and all, and they will have actually something. And somebody says that pineapple has anti-cancer properties. I have no knowledge of that. It may have indeed, but that needs to be tested. Thank you, Sonika.
Most welcome. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your talk and taking time from your such a busy schedule. It was indeed like you get to know like the CSR initiatives with respect to the drug discovery program, and I'm sure like it will motivate participants to pursue drug discovery as a career. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is it okay for me to log out, Sonika?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. All the best, and all the best to everyone.
So dear participants, I think since as you know, like DGCSR like short of time, so it's fine. We can have early like closing today, and tomorrow morning we will again start with our speakers, and I will put up the attendance form and kindly fill it by 6 o'clock.